there was something about two brains coming together and kind of pushing each other a little bit further than we might have in our own work. We're not interested in providing the viewer with concrete information. We are interested in our role as layperson learning about a place or a topic. One of the things I think that's important about our process is how long it takes. So it's not only the art making, but it's this research element. We follow data in a way that we compare to an early cartographer, an early map maker, and all of that takes time. We tend to gravitate towards things that we want to do, so someone will take the lead on doing this interview or researching that aspect of something. We push the envelope for each other and somehow for ourselves in this collaboration. For us, the most important thing is that in each artwork, there is this sense of history and information that's almost intangible. There's a hope that the viewer will feel that sense of time and will want to spend some time with the work as well.
Hit the escape button a whole bunch of times. Did it? Okay. Didn't work.
No. Escape. Little escape.
There it goes. All right. There we go. All right. Now you got to close that one.
I think artificial intelligence could help this process.
Not intelligence?
You did it. Phew. That's a lot of good job. All right. So, thank you.
So I'm Amanda Hughen, and this is Jennifer Starkweather. And we've been working together for about 12 years as Hughen Starkweather. And as you saw in the video, we're visual artists, and we do work, site-specific work about places or a topic.
We met, we'll give you a little bit of background. We both were at the Headland Center for the Arts, which is an artist residency over across the bridge in Sausalito. And we had studios there for about 3 years across from each other. And Amanda worked with did a lot of abstract work having to do with the built environment, and I was interested in more kind of natural patterns. And we talked about collaborating for quite a while. And it was not until after we both left the Headlands that we got our first commission to collaborate. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. We never really intended on collaborating beyond that project.
But here we are. So this is us working together at the Monster Drawing Rally at Southern Exposure. That's this amazing annual event. But this is a rare moment of us working together on a drawing, because normally we actually don't share a studio. Our studios are separate on separate parts of the city, and so we work in our own studios on the pieces, and then we drive across town and meet and show each other the work and discuss next steps. But we do a lot of this together, which is interviewing people about a topic. So for example, this is actually here at USF, and we were interviewing Melinda Stone about Humboldt. She grew up near Humboldt Bay, and we were doing a project about the Pacific Rim and shoreline shifts. And for the past, I guess 4 or 5 years, we've been doing work about climate and shorelines. And believe it or not, 4 or 5 years ago, people weren't really talking about it very much. And of course now, it's a little more in the air, so to speak.
And this, the project, the Shifting Shorelines project, initially we focused on the San Francisco Bay and the Bay shorelines, looking at how that edge between the Bay water and the Bay urban development has been influenced by history and environment and humans, and so we tend to gather a lot of data and information. You can see we do a lot of interviews too to help us kind of understand and build knowledge about what that particular topic or place.
So we spend a lot of time in the research phase of a project. So we, as we said, we interview a lot of people, we go to the places, we look at maps, we look at historic documents, we look at data, and then we take all that information, and that's when we kind of scurry off to our own studios and start to make this work. And there's a lot of conversation and sharing, and we trade the work back and forth, and then we end up with these abstract artworks. And so that's what interests us, is that all of this information kind of pouring into what ends up being something that doesn't have the information in it, and that we're asking the viewer to bring their own thoughts and ideas to these pieces. So this is a detail of a piece that's about San Francisco and its shorelines.
And that's about Humboldt.
What?
Humboldt Bay there.
Couldn't hear.
That's about Humboldt Bay there.
Humboldt Bay, and this is a detail of that piece. So our work is very detailed, a lot of small moments.
And some of the work is very recognizable, like you would see an obvious image of a map or some,
This is the bay right here.
you know, there oftentimes can be something that you can latch on to, whether it's a city grid that gives you a little bit of a hint of what it is that you're looking at. But, you know, our interest is in kind of creating an emotional experience or an aesthetic experience with the work.
So we're interested in obviously going beyond the data and the information, and as Jennifer just said, inviting the audience or the viewer to have their own response. But there's always this moment. So for this piece is called A Road, and it's about 5 feet wide. And this shape here, you'll see, is from this map, the 1666 map, Dutch map of California as an island. And this is interesting today on many levels, politically, of course, and also just this idea of what's happening with climate events, and what could happen in the future. This is another piece based on that same shape of California as an island. And these black lines are based directly on a map of fault lines running through California. So here's a detail of that piece.
And the interview piece has really changed a lot in our work. And in some of our earlier projects, we would reach out to people or interview people for information. And then we started to, I think one thing that really resonated with us was people's stories about the topic that they were invested in, whether it was the Bay Bridge or a particular place. And so a lot of our conversations, some of them became more formal, and actually we ended up recording them, became more this element of personal storytelling. So it was a chance for them to for our interviewee to reflect on a story or a personal experience or a memory about a place.
And at each time we show the work, we try to have some of the source material there available. So that could be in the form of a small library that we set up of source materials, books, articles, maps. We had a show at the Asian Art Museum where we had recorded interviews with people, and we invited people to sit in front of our abstract works and listen to the little excerpts of the interviews. And then there was a map where they could go through the museum and find these religious objects that the works were about. So these are just some more. These are all about 6 feet wide, these artworks. And here's an example of a piece, again, about San Francisco Bay, where the source material is evident. We were interviewing
Phyllis Faber. She's a scientist and an activist too, and this was probably in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and she was brought in when they were building Larkspur, the ferry. They had to do an EIR, and so they brought her in and other scientists as well to actually build that wetland in Puerto Madero behind Nordstrom's. And so we spoke to her about that story.
And then we created this piece based on that. So this is about 5 feet wide. And you can see up here in the corner a little hint of that ferry building there, which is the white triangular structure. And we also took imagery directly from some aerial views of the area, because obviously during king tides and the like, that area is already flooding. So we're already seeing a lot of the shoreline shifts that will be more common in the future. We did a big project about Bolinas Lagoon and the area up there, which has a long history of, our work is basically about the built environment and the natural environment and the history of shorelines. And this has a very intense political history of the sea drift development, blocking Bolinas Lagoon. And so this is a piece we did about that area. This work is about Ocean Beach and what's going to happen there. The Great Highway is obviously dredged every year.
And this actually was inspired by a conversation with Dean Derrico, who teaches here. And
Dean Rader.
I'm sorry, Dean Rader. Yes, sorry. Who told an amazing story about jumping into the Pacific Ocean as a kid for the first time with all his clothes on.
The first time you
And how
ever saw
cold it was.
the Pacific. So again, our source material, our historic information. As it said in the video, we think of ourselves, or we look at kind of early cartographers and how they had to listen to stories to understand a place. And we're very interested in that way of understanding a place. So pulling different data and information and maps from the past, and even thinking about the future and what that's going to look like for these places. And this is some of the way we've shown our information at some of our exhibitions. This is at the Asian Art Museum, the audio. And then we were going to briefly touch on a project we did last year at the Recology Residency, which is at the Dump here in San Francisco. And they approached us after we had been doing this work about climate and invited us to do work about compost, which was completely outside of our comfort zone, but interestingly for us has a lot to do with climate and climate change. And what they invited us in to do work about compost specifically,
But as we started to investigate, and we knew very little about it, we realized that, of course, it's an entire cycle involving food waste, single-use food packaging, so plastics, and how we
And stored carbon too.
Yes.
We went up to John Wick.
the Marin Carbon Project,
Marin Carbon
which is
Project.
amazing. If you guys don't know about that, that's an incredibly interesting project.
Who basically, he has a large piece of property up there that he purchased, and then it ended up being this kind of experimental research site for scientists to come in to start to understand how to store carbon in the soil. And it was not, because it was his own private land and he funded this himself, they were able to make a lot of just made a lot of progress in terms of their knowledge around this.
What is it?
So it's the
The
Marin
Marin
Carbon
Carbon.
Project, and basically, the what he's found with the help of Stanford and Berkeley, and they were actually about 2 months after we interviewed him, he was on the cover of the New York Times Magazine. It was the dirt cover. It was hands.
Dirt
holding
Save the Earth.
Can dirt save the earth? And basically, what he has found is that 1/4 inch of compost on rangelands, one application, for the next 5 years, the amount of carbon that is pulled into the soil from that one application is just a tremendous impact.
So he's proposed kind of new farming and rangeland practices to help store carbon. And he no longer, he still has the site, but they're no longer practicing, and he's into trying to create legislative changes.
So our work is a lot about data, layering different data on top of each other. And so in this instance, as I said, we got very interested in this idea of the food cycle and how not only packaging, but transportation, how's the food transported, this huge impact that it has on the environment. So because the residency is at the dump, they invite artists to go into the dump and pull things out that they want to use in their work. So we started collecting the single-use food packaging, which is of course everywhere. And we would trace those packages, and that's how we created this work. We also did a lot of reading, so we ended up basing each piece in this series on little pieces of text. So this was, for example, an interview with John Wick about how grasses are like straws sipping carbon from the air. And this circular image here was taken from probably, I don't know exactly, but like a yogurt container that we traced over and over again. So we were trying to pull that into the art. This piece involved,
It was a strawberry package,
Right.
one of those green plastic packages.
and so all of these pieces are directly related to this packaging, the compost, and again, inviting the viewer to have a reaction that's not necessarily about data or information, but it's there if they want it, because at the exhibition we had a lot of the information there, but to have more of an emotional response. And then very quickly,
Yes.
this is our most recent project, we're doing a project about Miami. And obviously Miami is on the front lines of what's happening with sea level rise. So we interviewed someone who had been through Hurricane Irma last year, and we just finished a series of works based on the evacuation routes. And this work is a departure for us because we, for the first time, have been experimenting with two things. One, working on fabric. We became very interested in fabric as a way to to start to think about a damaged object. So it's not so much about a work on paper, but it's actually an object that feels like it was damaged. We're also in this working with text. So we took a little piece of text from our interview, and in this case, it was this phrase, which was, "You don't know you have to leave until it's too late to leave," and which is true of hurricanes and of course Florida. It's actually very difficult to get out of Florida once the hurricane is bearing down.
And these were all printed on muslin and then stained